Steve Lamb, alcoholic. It's good to be here. It's good to be sober. Thanks for the invitation, Leslie. It's always an honor, a privilege to share in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's really important that I get reminded repeatedly how old I am. I really appreciate that. That really makes me feel good. And if you're new, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I want to say one thing for sure that you're with us now, and you may be thinking, "Oh man, I don't know that I want to be with us." I mean, we're pretty weird. I mean, apparently you guys like to wear red. This is all kinds of weird stuff that goes on. People in Michigan are very, very strange, apparently. And I can just assure you that you probably are too, if you're one of us. And if you lean into it and keep a good sense of humor, you'll realize that it's a great way of life. It's a great way of life. And if you're thinking that that's not a great, well, what are your options? If you're an alcoholic of my variety, what are your options? I'm not an authority in AA. I wasn't appointed. I wasn't anointed. I'm just going to share some of my experience with you guys today. And I'm an alcoholic. I'm powerless over alcohol. My life is unmanageable. And I had realized that for quite some time. God, when I was in the Army, I was in the Army for 13 and a half years. I went through infantry training. I went to Ranger School. I went through selection and assessment, and I served as a Green Beret for a while. They then sent me to law school. When I got out of the Army, it was in 1993. I served 13 and a half years, and I was a JAG. I was working in the Pentagon, and I was the intelligence oversight advisor for the United States Army, which should concern the hell out of you, because I had a TSSCI clearance. I worked in a SCIF, which is a sensitive compartmented information facility, and all my activities were classified. And I had blanket travel orders. I would travel around the world, and I would coordinate with various people, special mission units, intelligence support activity, those type of people. And I came back one time from a trip, and I went to the Pentagon, and I was turning in my travel vouchers, and the travel clerk looked at the vouchers, and she says to me, "Oh, I see you were in the Philippines. What were you doing in the Philippines?" That's a reasonable question. And I immediately responded, "I can't tell you that. That's classified," which was true. But as I walked away, I thought, oh man, what was I doing in the Philippines? I mean, I remember I went to Thailand for a reason. I had a job in Thailand. I know that. And I've got vouchers that show that I was in the Philippines for a couple of days, but I have no recollection of being in the Philippines, what I did, why I was there. I can't, it's because I drink, I black out. I mean, I travel. I go places, right? And so I realized, one of the things that I realized, I can't control and enjoy my drinking. So, I'm not going to quit drinking. I don't want to overreact here. So I just resigned my commission from the Army. I got promoted early. I had a good career. I just quit, because I'm a runner. And I left. I came to Southern California. I joined a large international law firm, and I'm still drinking. And finally I got a DUI, and I got sentenced to go to AA, and I had to go. I remember the first meeting I went to, which was my sobriety date, July 27th, 1996. And I don't want to be there, but I vaguely realized that you're telling me your story, and your story is my story. I don't like my story. I don't like your story. I don't want to get sober. I don't want to stay sober. I don't. But I realized I got to stop drinking. So I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm so delusional. I'm just thinking that, if I just stop drinking, it'll get better. It'll get better. And what happened to me is I got worse. And I couldn't understand it because I'm not drinking. I'm very agitated. I'm irritated. The book talks about being restless, irritable, and discontent. I was just pissed off. I'm just pissed off. Pissed off at you, pissed off at me. I'm coming to meetings, and the old timers are looking at me, and they're saying, Lamb, don't cause a commotion. And for God's sakes, don't talk to any newcomers because they still have hope. It was just brutal. It was brutal. And I'm suffering from untreated alcoholism, or probably more accurately, you're suffering from my untreated alcoholism. And I went about 100 days stark, raving sober. I went on a business trip. I came back. I kind of had a meltdown. I got a sponsor. It wasn't my plan. I didn't want to get a sponsor, but this guy was talking about sponsorship, and I thought I should interview for a sponsor. He thought that was ridiculous, so he assigned me a sponsor, Michael, which pissed me off. And he's been my sponsor for 29 years plus, and I love the guy, but not when I first met him. And we sat down, we read the book, and we you know we said the prayers, and we got to the steps, and I worked the steps, and it changed my life, and it transformed me. And if you're new and you're looking at the 12 steps in the book or on a window shade at a meeting hall, if you're like me, you're probably thinking, this is ridiculous. This has nothing to do with my complex set of social issues. I mean, I don't know how this is going to help me get sober. I mean, this 4 and 5, that's like confession. I'm not going to do that. That's evidence. That's ridiculous. I'm a lawyer. I'm no way. And 8 and 9 is even worse. I mean, I'm not stupid. I know it's their money. I know that. But some of them, they don't even know I've got it. And how is me giving them back their money going to help me get sober? I mean, I got problems. I need the money step. I don't understand that the spiritual always precedes the material. But my sponsor just suggested that I take certain actions that I didn't believe, and I got results that I really couldn't deny. And it transformed me. And I thought I would talk a little bit this morning about fellowship, which is where I started with, and then sponsorship, which is what I've just been talking about, and finally relationship, all of which are related, and they're all commingled certainly. But I started out really with fellowship. I'm going to meetings, and one of the things that my sponsor wanted me to do was he wanted me to be of service, which sounded like work. So I wasn't really thrilled with that concept, and I remember he leaned in and he said, "Well, it sounds like work, Lamb, but it feels like love." And I thought, oh God, this is one of these fluffy AA platitudes. What a crock of crap, man. And he goes, hey, either do it or don't. These are the suggestions that I've got. He used to tell me the same thing I tell the guys I sponsor. I'm like a one-trick pony. I got the 12 steps. It's all I got. I mean, it's a really damn good trick, but it's all I got, right? And he goes, this is what we're talking about. And we're talking about, you got to develop a sense of service. We talk about unity, service, and recovery, and service is really important. I'm like, all right, well, what do I need to do? He goes, well, do you know McNeil? And I said, yeah, I know McNeil. He goes, well, you know McNeil, he's had a couple of DUIs. I'm like, yeah, so what? He goes, well, he can't drive. I'm like, okay. He goes, well, he lives in Culver City. He can't drive, and the home group is the Hermosa Beach Men's Stag. It's several miles away, and he can't drive. And you work in downtown LA, right? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, you have to drive by Culver City to get to Hermosa Beach, right? I'm like, yeah, so what? He goes, well, why don't you call McNeil and invite him to go to the meeting? Give him a ride. I'm like, I don't like McNeil. And Michael said, I didn't ask you if you liked McNeil. Remember you said you were willing to go to any length to have victory over alcohol, right? I said, yeah, I know we read that. I said that, but nobody means that crap, right? Michael, I said, well, do it or don't. This is my suggestion. He really didn't argue with me. He would just say, either do it or don't, and let me know how it works out. And usually when I don't do it, it doesn't work out very well. So I finally take the actions, the steps that he suggests. So I'm like, oh God, all right. And then he says to me, he says, why don't you like McNeil? I said, well, I don't know if you notice this, but McNeil will not shut up, man. That guy talks all the time. He drives me crazy. I can't even think straight. And Michael goes, perfect. Call McNeil. I'm like, God, you are not listening to me, right? But I don't know what to do, so I call McNeil. McNeil's all excited. He's like a puppy dog. I get him in the car. I'm going to the meeting. I'm driving to the meeting, and he does what McNeil does. He's talking the whole time. He's driving me crazy. I can't even think straight. We get to the meeting hall. We get in there, and Michael's there. He goes, hey, how did it go? I'm like, God, it's intolerable. That he's ridiculous. He's laughing. He's like, well, what were you thinking about while McNeil was talking? I said, I'm thinking I got to get him the hell out of the car. The guy's driving me crazy, right? And he goes, well, perfect. That's a sweet spot. That's when we get into that's conscious contact. That's how we get out of self and into God. And I'm like, well, yeah, well, it looks and sounds a lot like McNeil. And he's like, well, it's just a suggestion, right? So I'm driving McNeil to the meeting, right? And I'm begrudgingly starting to notice, because McNeil does what McNeil does. He just talk, right? And, I don't have time to think about myself, and it's a relief. I'm getting out of self and into God. I don't even know what I'm doing, right? And I'm feeling pretty good about that, right? And I don't know what happens in other parts of the country, but in Southern California, I mean, Michigan may be different. I guess you say that there's some weird people in Michigan, but in Southern California, there's some pretty weird characters. And I got to tell you, they'll cheat on you. And McNeil cheated on me. He asked another guy for a ride. Can you believe that? I mean, I don't even like this guy, but he's my guy. It's my commitment. And I'm explaining to Michael that this is bullshit, man. This is my guy, right? He's laughing. He thinks it's funny. If you're new, all sponsors think that everything's funny. It becomes really funny. It's not funny when you're new, but later it's hilarious. And he's cracking up and he's like, hey, get another one. I'm like, get another what? He goes, get another newcomer. I'm like, you can do that? He goes, yeah, they're everywhere. And they are. We are. And I got one. McNeil got one. I've been sober for 29 years. McNeil's been sober for 29 years. And most days I like McNeil. Not every day, but most days I like McNeil now. So it's like it grows on you. So, I'm learning about fellowship and I'm learning about sponsorship and I'm going through the steps and I do the inventory. I make the amends and, we get to the amends process and, in the inventory, the first person I'm in inventory was my father. I resented my father and the cause was he deserted me. That was my perception. That was my story. And if you're new, you'll learn that we're a society of storytellers. That's how we get recovery. But the interesting thing is that the story kind of shifts when you have some experience and you realize some things that aren't exactly the way we thought we were when we were new. But I was pissed off at my father. I hated him. I hated him. I'm not going to make amends to him. I read the inventory to Michael and Michael said, yeah, don't worry about it. We'll deal with it later. We did 6 and 7 very superficially, by the way. I read the paragraphs. I said the prayer. I thought, what's the big deal? I found out later, like the boomerang steps, they come back and get you later. But I get to this 8th step. I'm on page 76 and I read, it says, we have a list of those we've harmed. We made it when we did our inventory. I thought, oh crap, my father was right on the list. So I'm a lawyer. I'm pretty creative. I'm very flexible. So I just took him off the list, right? And I take him off the list. I got this list and I'm supposed to do these proposed amends and I show up and I tell Michael I got the list. He says, okay, let me see it. Apparently he doesn't trust me, which I don't understand. I don't understand the problem, right? So he shows me the list and he goes, hey, your father's not on the list. I'm like, you're damn right he's not on the list. I told you he wasn't going to be on the list. He goes, well, look, because, we're supposed to be, we have to have honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, and we got to be willing to make amends. And I said, I don't know why I didn't do anything. I mean, I was young. He said, well, you're withholding him from you, right? And you hate him, right? Yeah. And he pointed out that on page 67, it has this prayer. Sometimes it's called the prayer to the sick man. We're supposed to ask these people for patience, pity, and tolerance for these people that we hate. We're supposed to go to our higher power and ask for this. And I'm not going to do that. He goes, well, 6 and 8 are a lot about willingness. I'm suggesting that you continue to try to do that. You should pray. He goes, all right, I'll pray. I'll do it. He goes, all right, you pray, I'll pray. We'll both pray, right? And this goes on for a while. And actually several years. And I go through, I make amends. I'm back in the big bed. I don't have the crossover privileges that I think I deserve with my wife, but things are going better. And I'm making amends. I'm doing 10, 11, and 12. And 10 is continue. It says 4 times on page 84, continue. And on step 11, I'm supposed to have develop this conscious contact. I'm supposed to pray and meditate. I'm trying to do that. And 12 says that I'm supposed to try, the emphasis is try, to practice the principles and try to carry the message. And I got these guys, I'm starting to sponsor these guys. And they're getting sober. Some of them are getting other sponsees. It's going pretty well. But I am not making amends to my father. And my sponsor, we talk regularly. He's sponsored me for 29 years and change. And I talk to him pretty regularly. And particularly when I was relatively new, we talked all the time. And he wasn't nagging me, but he would periodically ask me how things are going with my father. When you're praying and meditating, you're asking God for guidance and direction regarding this resentment. What's coming to you? I'm like, nothing. I'm good. He goes, well, God is old and slow. He doesn't wear a wristwatch. You got to be patient. You got to listen. You got to wait for the opportunity. I'm like, all right, fine. And then one day I'm having a conversation with him and I'm just explaining to him that I got to go up to Anchorage, Alaska to do some depositions to get ready for a trial. He lights up like a Christmas tree. He gets all excited. He goes, "Man, that's great. You'll make amends to your father." And apparently I had mentioned to him some years ago that my father was living in Wasilla, Alaska, which is about 30 miles outside of Anchorage. So now my sponsor is connecting two clearly unrelated dots. And I'm explaining to him, this is, no, Michael, you don't understand. This is business. This has nothing to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. And he explained to me, he said, look, everything has everything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. You just don't realize it, and you certainly haven't demonstrated it yet. I'm just suggesting that you call your father. I'm like, oh, God. So I call him. He says he'll see me. And I fly up there and I see him. He's older than I remembered. He's shorter than I remembered. And remember, I hate him. And I'm talking to God. I'm flying. I'm asking God, hey, like, all right, big guy, tell me. I'm ready I got nothing. No message is coming. There's no burning bush. Nobody's talking to me, but I've made a commitment in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I show up there and without really even thinking about it, I see my father and I walked up to him. And I just grabbed him and I hugged him and he buried his head in my shoulder and he cried and I cried and forgiveness occurred. And all I had to do was show up and get out of the way. Now I made more formal amends later. I talked to him. I asked him if there was anything that I could do. I really kind of told him that I left him out of my life and, I didn't want to do that. And, my relationship got better. He came down to Southern California. I met my half-sister, Peck, and I met my stepmother, Leanne Thong, and it wasn't like we were this warm, fuzzy family unit. I mean, I never played ball with my father or any of that type of stuff because this happened when I was 5 years old when he left, and I was 37, 38 when I got sober, so it was 3 decades that I didn't really see him, but I no longer hated my father. And that was a big deal. And I realized that there was some forgiveness there. And we talk a lot about forgiveness. In fact, we talk a lot about acceptance. There's a great story in the big book, by Dr. Paul about acceptance. Acceptance was the answer. It used to be Dr. Alcoholic Addict, but now it's acceptance is the answer. And it's great. But I remember Dr. Paul one time told me that, it is the answer. But it's not like he didn't like his own story, but he said sometimes people don't understand that, yeah, that's the answer. But like acceptance sometimes is only the beginning, because if you accept somebody, you can still resent them. But if you forgive, it's over. But the problem is forgiveness is difficult. It usually takes divine intervention. In my example, it takes a sponsor assist, really. He kind of tricked me into this, right? And so I realize, and I've got forgiveness, and it's a big thing. Forgiveness is important. It's a critical thing. I had no idea, and I've come to realize that forgiveness is important because it was 9 years ago in 2016 I got shot. And I'd been shot before when I was in the military, but this time when I got shot I was sober. And by the way, you're not supposed to get shot anymore once you're sober. I mean, it's not a rule, but it's kind of a good thing to go by. But I was up in the Seven Circles Retreat Center in Badger, California, which is a beautiful area. It's by Sequoia National Forest. And I was in this cabin. It's a 2-story cabin. I'm on the ground floor. And upstairs there was a guy, and he was clearing his Glock 9mm weapon, and he missed a critical step. He forgot to remove the magazine. So when he pulled the slide back, he chambered around and he went to clear it. He pulled the trigger. He pointed at the floor, which was the ceiling above me. It went through the ceiling and it entered my chest, which will get your attention. And we talk a lot about spirituality and serenity. And I got to admit, the first words out of my mouth were I yelped a shortened version of fire truck, and I grabbed a towel and I'm bleeding. The guy comes from downstairs and he says, what happened? All right, Captain Obvious, you shot me. So I told him, you shot me, right? And he's freaking out. And I did a really weird thing that really shocked me. I started trying to calm him down, tell him it's going to be okay. I know you didn't mean to do it. And what happened was I shifted right from acceptance through forgiveness. And I did that because I'd been working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's not my natural reaction. I can assure you, this happened when I was coming up on my 20th AA birthday. And if it had happened 21, 22 years before that, I would have been 10 different shades of pissed off. I don't know what your idea of a justified resentment is, but hey, getting shot, that ought to be pretty high on the list, right? But I go through this, I get this forgiveness, but I've been shot. I got to go down the hill, takes me to the hospital. I go to the hospital. The nurse asks me if, can I help you? And I'm thinking it's pretty obvious. I got this bloody towel. I said, I've been shot. Now, when you tell them you've been shot, you go right to the head of the list. I mean, there are people, there's broken legs and stuff. But they clear out. I got like, I don't know, I got a crash cart going. They got 8 or 9 people working on me. They do an overhead x-ray. They got a cardiothoracic surgeon. He's looking at the x-ray. And after a while, he looks, he goes, God, Mr. Lamb, I don't know what happened. This is bizarre, but this round, it missed your heart, your spinal cord, all your major arteries by like millimeters. I don't know. It's lodged in your sternum. It's not moving. It's immobilized. The bleeding has stopped. And we're going to observe you for a couple of days, and we're going to let you go. We're going to release you. But when you go down south, you need to talk to a cardiologist. You're going to probably need some treatment because you've got this. When we did the EKG, we noticed you've got this atrial flutter. Your heart is spasming. You're going to need some treatment for this, right? So I go down where I live in Southern California. There's Torrance Memorial Medical Center. It's our local hospital. I go to Dr. Carlson. He does an EKG. He says, yeah, you've got an atrial flutter. He says, you've seen in the movies where they take the pads and they shock them? I'm like, yeah. He goes, that's barbaric. We would never do that with you. What we're going to do with you is we're going to tape these pads to your chest. They're hooked to electrodes. And we're going to hit you with a jolt of electricity. It's called a cardioversion. And your heart will stop. And in 5 or 7 seconds, we'll hit you with another jolt of electricity. Your heart will start again. And hopefully it'll be in sync. I'm like, hey, doc, that sounds like you're going to kill me. He's like, oh, no. We don't look at it that way. It's a controlled procedure. I've done it many, many times in the hospital. And by the way, in the hospital, there will be an anesthesiologist that will give you something to make you comfortable. So I'm an alcoholic. I go from you're going to kill me to I'm going to get comfortable. And it's not that I haven't been comfortable, but I haven't been that kind of comfortable in 20 years, right? And this is like a free pass. I talked to my sponsor. He's okay with it. I got the gown on. My butt's hanging out. I got the IV on. I got the pads on. Dr. Carlson's here. Anesthesiologist walks in. He's got a syringe comfortable. He starts having a chat with me. Next thing I know, Dr. Carlson's leaning over. He goes, hey, how you doing? I go, I'm good. He goes, well, how do you feel? I said, I feel fine. I'm ready. Let's do the procedure. He's like, oh, no, we did the procedure. The procedure's over. And I'm looking around because I don't see Dr. Comfortable. And I start arguing with my cardiologist. I'm like, hey, you told me I was going to get comfortable because I'm pissed off, right? I didn't get comfortable because they gave me this stuff called propofol, which they give you propofol and you're here, then you're here. There's no there. There's like in the old days when when you give you anesthesia, when they tell you to count back from 100, like my old grand sponsor, Scott Redmond used to talk about, like, count back from 100. You're like 199, 90, I'm waiting for 99. There's no 99. It was very disappointing. I would go as far as to say it was bad dope, but that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that I got forgiveness and it was granted to me. It was grace to me by the work that I'd done in Alcoholics Anonymous and by a higher power that I really could never see, but I've experienced. And, one of the weird things about this story, though, is I talked about the 10th step. We're supposed to continue. It talks a lot about in the 12 and 12, in the 10th step, it talks about the various forms of inventory, which are all really important. But it also mentions that many of us like to take the occasional retreat. They want to get away from the clamors of the world. They want to go to a safe, secure, serene environment. I just came from a serene place out in outside of Portland. I went there with Bill C. Just came from a retreat. But the point is, retreat is a safe, secure, serene environment, right? I got shot on a retreat. I was leading the retreat. That's not supposed to happen. And here's the best part. The guy that shot me, I sponsor him. I sponsored him then. I sponsor him now. And if you're new, I want to tell you the message of today is I'm not telling you to shoot your sponsor. I'm just telling you this is what happened to me. Okay. And the point is if you're an alcoholic, you're gonna make messes. That it's funny. It's always like there's a mess on aisle 11, alcoholic, inactivity, and a cleanup in process. And I made a lot of mistakes before I got sober. I made a lot of mistakes after I got sober, and he made a mistake. And because of Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps, we were able to experience that process of acceptance and forgiveness, which is it's a big deal. It's a big deal. But we get into that, and so we've got the fellowship, and we've got the sponsorship, and now I'm working with guys. But it was through working with guys that I really understood the value of relationship. And my sponsor used to tell me all the time, he would say, Lamb, you're going to get more out of your relationship with the guys that you sponsor than your relationship with me, which I thought was ridiculous. I mean, I'm thinking this guy saved my life, right? And, what's the big deal? But I found that that's true. And the interesting thing is, like, when I got shot, because, you're not supposed to have a cell phone, but I don't like to follow the rules. So I'm in the hospital. I got a cell phone. I convinced the nurse to give me a charger, and because I get calls, I got sponsees, I got responsibilities, right? And they call me, right? So this guy calls me, and he does what a lot of sponsees do, like what we're all supposed to do. You get a call and you go, "Hey, how are you doing?" That's a reasonable request, right? So I say, "Well, I've had better days. I got shot." I start explaining that I got shot. He interrupts me and says, "Yeah. You're gonna be okay. Well, let me tell you what she did yesterday." This is McNeil. This is McNeil. This is what we're there for. They're alcoholics. They're divine distractions. And so now we're talking about this guy and his problem, and I'm not worried and thinking as much about getting shot or my other problems or seeming difficulties or defects that I have. And what happens is that a lot of these defects of characters, they don't go away, but they erode over time and they get less prominent because of working with others. Because my experience is in this 11th step, we pray and meditate and we ask for guidance. And, we talk to this higher power. And it seems to me that every time that happens, he sends me to you and you to me. I don't know. Apparently that's how he works. I don't know. It's I don't really have to understand it. But I've experienced it. And it's a beautiful thing. And this thing about relationship and when you get into the sponsorship chain is, we talk a lot about honesty, but it's hard. It was hard for me it was difficult for me to disclose things to my sponsor. That was one thing. But to other people, my sponsees, I couldn't do that. And one of the major defects of character that I had that I recognized pretty quickly was I like to say it's a really uncanny wit. My sponsor said, "No, you're a dick." I had sarcasm problems. And I got it. And I'm not talking about an idle comment. I'm talking about, like, I'm saying something to you and your face is falling and I'm not supposed to do this. Now in 10, I recognize this. I do an evening review, like, all right, I'm a dick. I got to make amends. I got to go to him. I got to make amends. And this is going on. And it's just like, it's just not going away. And so, I'm aware of 6 and 7. I didn't do much in 6 and 7 when I was new, but after a while in 10, now it's boomeranging back. Am I really ready, willing, and able? Do I want this defect to be removed? And sometimes the answer is no. I kind of like it. It's kind of tasty. But once you finally realize that, yeah, hey, I want this defect to be, now I've got to humbly ask God. I got to humbly ask this higher power to have it removed. So I do that, right? I pray. I meditate, I get quiet, and it's not going away. And in this 10th step, I'm talking to Michael, and he's like, all right, he goes, before the first edition came out, the 7th step used to read, humbly on our knees. They took that part out, but maybe your problem is you're not showing enough humility. Maybe if you got on your knees, that would help. Because I know you're praying. I know you're talking to God. You're asking God, but it's not working, right? Yeah, it's not working. So are you willing to try that? Yeah, I'll try that. So I'm praying and meditating. I'm on my knees. I'm asking God. I'm trying to be humble, which, as you probably know, I'm not very effective at. But I'm working on it, and it's not working. and I'm still sarcastic. I make amends, talk to Michael. It's going on and on. I'm talking to him. He goes, all right. He goes, look, this isn't in the book, but I got an idea. Are you willing to try something? I'm like, yeah, this is killing me. It's eating my lunch. You don't like it. I don't like it. Everybody, it's bad. He says, I tell you what, he says, do you have Post-it notes? I said, yeah. He goes, what I want you to do is I want you to take a Post-it note. I want you to write, don't be a dick on the Post-it note. I want you to put it on your mirror, put it on your dashboard, put it like 5 or 6 different places so you'll be reminded, don't be a dick, don't be sarcastic, pray and meditate, get on your knees, ask God to remove this defect. I got it. I'm doing it, right? I keep doing it, and I'm still a dick, right? And I'm really having problems with this, and everybody around me's not that happy with it either, really, because I am a dick, and so I don't know what to do. And I'm talking to Michael, and he goes, "All right, I tell you what, let me talk to my sponsor." I'm like, ooh, I don't know, it's one thing. The sponsor's one thing. Now the sponsor, the grand sponsor. I don't know. We want to overreact here, but it's killing me. So he calls Scott, and he says, all right, I talked to Scott. Call Scott. Oh God. So I call Scott, and I say, hey, yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've got this defective character. I've talked to Michael about it. I really got a problem with sarcasm. And Scott goes, yeah, we've noticed. And he goes, well, I'm talking to him and say, I really, I need to address it. He goes, yeah, we got it. I got the solution to this, right? So I'm thinking, oh, cool, man. The guy's going to tell me 2 or 3 things. I'm going to do it. I'll be done. My grand sponsor, no problem. And what Scott starts doing is he starts reading me his inventory. He's telling me his inventory. This goes on for, I don't know, about 20 or 30 seconds. And I stop him like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? He's like, what do you mean? What am I doing? I said, well, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm reading inventory. Inventory. I go, yeah, I know what inventory. He goes, well, what's the problem? I said, well, I don't know. I mean, I write inventory. I read it to my sponsor. I have sponsees. They write inventory. They read it to me. But, my sponsor hasn't been reading me inventory. Clearly my grand sponsor's not supposed to read me inventory. He's like, what? Where did you hear that? I said, I don't know. I just make shit up. It just seemed to be logical. I mean, like there's a hierarchy. There's like a hierarchy of thing, and there's no hierarchy. I mean, sometimes we think there is, but there isn't, right? And he's like, look, there's no hierarchy. We're trying to be shoulder to shoulder, right? We want to develop this relationship. We want to be open and honest and willing. And he explained to me is we need to address these. He used to call them a real piece of business. You got to keep it above the horizon, because these things pop up. And he said, and by the way, one of the reasons why I do this is this helps me to try to be more humble. And then he hung up. But before he hung up, he said, you ought to try it. And I could see his point. I really could. I mean, it made a lot of sense. But I'm a thinker, and I'm thinking, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. No way, man. I mean, because I got a lot of sponsees. I'll look bad. I can't do that, right? So I go back to the Post-it note, and I'm praying, I'm meditating, I'm on my knees, and I'm a dick. I still keep doing it. And finally, as the book says, eventually you get beaten into a state of reasonableness. So I'm like, oh God. So I call this guy that I sponsor, right? And I start reading him inventory, and he starts chuckling. And I'm like, hey, don't get over your skis here. Listen here, Skippy, just listen to this, right? So I read him the rest of the inventory, and he gets done. And he's like, this is great, Lamb. This is great. You're going to share this with the rest of the guys, right? Because I sponsor quite a few guys. I'm like, hey, let's not overreact here. But I thought about it, and I started doing that. And what happened is, unbeknownst to me, I went from fellowship to sponsorship to relationship. And, I can't tell you how important that's been to me. Not only I think has it helped me be less of a dick and help you through God address my defects of character, but I've tried to develop kind of a state of compassion that I don't know existed before that. When I was in the military, I was diagnosed as a borderline sociopath. And I thought, yeah, borderline, that's pretty good. That's not good. That's bad. I lack empathy. I can't relate to people because I think, and I look back and I realize the reason why I don't do that is because I'm afraid. Because if you get close to me, you might disappoint me. And if you disappoint me, I'll be hurt. So I don't want to be disappointed. So if I don't have a relationship, I have to deal with you. It doesn't bother me, you know. And part of the problem with developing a relationship is I mean, I got guys, I love these guys, and I can actually, when hang up the phone a lot, I say, I love you, goodbye. Why do I do that? Because that's what Scott used to do to me. He said, bug the shit out of me. Because it was like, ooh, it's kind of like I remember when my dad, when I made amends to my dad, I started working with him and talking to him and I'd give him a hug and he'd kind of stiffen up and he'd maybe give me a little pat back. He was uncomfortable and then he got comfortable and it takes a while. And part of it is because I haven't really walked through the whole story yet. And part of what happens in my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous is we go through this process, we go through fellowship, we go through sponsorship, we start relationship, and we realize that often our story is it's not even necessarily wrong entirely, but it's not complete. It's not really accurate. And I don't know, just I mean the book talks about how remarkable things will happen and that's true and before my father died, he made amends to me. It took a few years, but it was during COVID, and he was dying. He had congestive heart failures in the hospital, and nobody could go see him because he didn't have COVID, but he was in the ward. They wouldn't let anybody in. Leon Thong couldn't see him. Peck couldn't see him. I couldn't go see him. But we had taught him how to do FaceTime, right? So he's got a phone, FaceTime, right? But he's not very techno savvy, and he's I'm telling him he got to hold the phone up, but he can't hear. So he's holding up to his very hairy ear. So I'm talking to my father's extraordinarily hairy ear, right? And he makes amends. It was kind of a lame amends. I'm not judging, but if I'd have given him specific direction, it would have been better. But that's not the point. The point is a father was restored to a son and a son to a father. And I was okay with it, and I no longer hated my father. And when my father died, a while after that, he was buried in Arlington, which is kind of a big deal. And we're in Arlington, and they read one of his citations. And one of his citations for his Silver Star, he had a Distinguished Flying Cross, and he had a Silver Star, and an Air Medal, and some other stuff. And one of his commendations was they talked about how this guy Bill Buckley he was in special forces like I was in special forces, and Bill was in an A team. It was in Vietnam, and they came under fire, and they got saved. They got rescued by this guy Ted Lamb, my father, in a small aircraft. And this apparently, my father flew in he landed on a rice paddy dike, which is almost impossible. Came in 3 times, picked up Bill Buckley and his team and saved him. And I'm listening to this and I realized I knew Bill Buckley. He was a CIA station chief in 1983 when I was an A-team leader in Beirut. And he saved my life in 1983. And I had no idea about this. He was later captured and he was actually killed by the Hezbollah. But we think all this stuff is separate and apart. The grand illusion, the prime delusion of every alcoholic of my variety is that I am separate and apart from you. That's not true. That's not real. But until I go through this process and work the steps, I can't realize that and I can't demonstrate that. The interrelationship becomes more obvious as we do this work. So if you're new, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. You're with us now. And if you come all the way in and you sit all the way down and join us, buckle up. It's a hell of a ride. Thanks for having me here.